Meet Mark. After 4 grueling months flipping burgers part-time at McDonald's while juggling high school, he's finally ready to build his first proper gaming PC. No more suffering through choppy frame rates on his ancient Bavo ThinkPad. He's been eating cafeteria leftovers, saving every dollar, dreaming of this moment. Walking into Best Buy with his hard-earned cash, Mark's excitement is palpable. He navigates through aisles of components, mentally checking off his list. Then he reaches the memory section and freezes. A 32GB RAM kit sits on the shelf with a price tag that makes his stomach drop. This can't be right. He remembers checking prices just months ago. They were nowhere near this expensive. A single memory kit now costs as much as a mid-range graphics card. Around him, other frustrated shoppers voice similar complaints. Some are discovering that adding just 16 gigabytes of RAM to their systems now exceeds the price of a brand new PlayStation 5. Mark stands there, doing the mental math. At this rate, he'd need several more months of work just to afford the components. And who's to say prices won't climb even higher by then? So what's driving this unprecedented surge? How did computer memory prices escalate faster than precious metals in mere months? And what does this mean for the future of personal computing? Welcome to the global memory crisis. Before diving into the crisis, let's clarify what we're actually talking about. Your computer relies on 2 distinct types of memory, and both are currently affected. DRAM, your computer's working memory. DRAM serves as short-term memory. It's the workspace where your computer performs active tasks. Every browser tab you open, every game you launch, every video you edit, all of it requires DRAM. Having more DRAM translates to smoother multitasking, superior performance, and minimal lag during everyday computing. NAND, your computer's storage memory. NAND represents the second crucial memory type. This is what populates your SSDs, smartphones, and USB drives. NAND is where your files, applications, games, photographs, and all other data physically reside for long-term storage. Modern computers require both memory types to function as we've come to expect. Unfortunately, this dual dependency is precisely why the current crisis hits so hard. When demand explodes and manufacturers struggle to keep pace, both RAM and SSDs become prohibitively expensive for average consumers.
Let's return to Mark, still standing shell-shocked in that Best Buy aisle. His carefully planned PC build has just evaporated before his eyes. The price increases mean months of additional work for the same components, and major tech corporations are already forecasting that conditions will deteriorate further. Consider the numbers. A 32GB DDR5 kit has tripled in cost over just 12 months. But memory modules aren't the only victims. SSDs are climbing steadily. Even traditional hard drives are becoming more expensive. This astronomical price growth is forcing countless consumers like Mark completely out of the personal computer market. You've probably guessed the villains in this story: big tech and artificial intelligence. Everyone's familiar with data centers by now, those massive, windowless buildings that dot industrial parks. But what actually happens inside those structures is what should concern us. AI data centers function essentially as supercomputers on performance-enhancing drugs. They continuously run artificial intelligence models across thousands of GPUs. Each facility demands thousands of RAM kits and countless terabytes of NAND storage. Now multiply that by the numerous data centers sprouting up globally, and you'll understand why memory demand is skyrocketing. A single AI cluster can consume as much memory as millions of personal computers combined. Who's orchestrating this massive AI data center expansion? The usual suspects from Silicon Valley. OpenAI, Microsoft, Google, and their peers are all involved, signing enormous contracts with memory manufacturers that further constrict available supply. OpenAI alone has announced that their Stargate project could absorb up to 40% of the world's entire DRAM production. Keep in mind, this is the same company that publicly acknowledged they won't reach profitability until 2030.
definitely not a red flag at all. What makes this situation particularly alarming is how these tech giants and manufacturers are effectively excluding everyday consumers from the memory market. Corporate buyers aren't simply purchasing a few months' worth of supply, they're contractually reserving production capacity years into the future. From the supplier perspective, this arrangement is irresistible. Companies like Samsung and Micron would be foolish to decline such guaranteed revenue. These suppliers naturally shift their production priorities to accommodate growing AI demand. Instead of manufacturing consumer-grade DRAM, they're producing memory specifically optimized for servers and data centers. Consequently, consumer RAM and SSDs become scarce for end users like us because big tech pays premium prices and commits to long-term contracts. Why not just build more factories? The obvious solution seems simple. If it's just supply and demand, manufacturers should construct additional facilities, right? The obstacle is that suppliers fear oversupply would trigger catastrophic price crashes. Combined with the reality that constructing a single new semiconductor facility requires years and billions in investment, you begin to understand why suppliers like Micron are completely abandoning the consumer memory market to focus exclusively on corporate clients. Imagine if airlines sold every seat on every flight for the next 3 years exclusively to a handful of corporate buyers. Sure, regular passengers could still technically fly, but only by paying business class rates for the worst seats available. That's essentially how the RAM and storage market functions now. This brings us back to Mark, trapped between AI's insatiable appetite, big tech's purchasing power, and manufacturers perfectly willing to abandon individual consumers. The ripple effect across all devices. Mark heads toward the laptop section, hoping to salvage something from his savings. Unfortunately, prices there aren't any better. Because memory is being monopolized by a handful of tech corporations, even companies that manufacture consumer hardware are caught in the crossfire. When RAM and SSD prices surge, costs rise for every hardware manufacturer dependent on these components. This affects virtually every category of smart devices. Laptop manufacturers, console producers, smartphone companies all face elevated memory costs inevitably passed directly to consumers. The fundamental way we interact with consumer electronics and technology is shifting, and not in our favor. The explosive spike in DDR5 RAM prices alone represents a significant problem, transforming basic PC upgrades into semi-luxury purchases. But this creates an even more severe issue for professionals in creative industries. Video editors, digital artists, audio engineers, software developers, and countless others now face dramatically increased costs for simply doing their jobs. New laptops and devices entering the market are being quietly redesigned around this new memory economy. Increasingly, devices ship with minimal RAM, perhaps 8 GB by default, maybe 16 GB if you pay a premium. That memory is often soldered directly onto the motherboard. The configuration you select on purchase day becomes the permanent ceiling for that machine's lifespan. Simultaneously, these devices lean heavily on cloud-based features. On paper, you're receiving AI-powered everything. In practice, you're getting a weaker device dependent on someone else's hardware infrastructure. The consequences manifest everywhere. The film student waiting overnight for projects to render because they couldn't afford sufficient RAM. The indie game developer abandoning their passion project because they can't afford devices capable of running modern development engines. The school IT administrator forced to choose between fewer adequate computers or more underpowered ones, fully aware that either option leaves some students behind. Because technology has become so deeply embedded in our lives, sudden increases in essential component prices don't remain confined to specification sheets. They ripple into classrooms, creative studios, offices, and living rooms in ways most people never anticipate. Computing becomes a luxury. That's the harsh reality behind insane RAM prices. It's not merely a jagged line on a market graph. It's a gradual narrowing of who actually accesses real computing power. A widening gulf between mega corporations and everyone else. where countless terabytes of memory are diverted into server racks you'll never see, owned by companies you only encounter in news headlines, pursuing an AI-powered future you're told to embrace, even though much of it struggles to generate profit. So we have to ask, what happens to creativity and experimentation when a decent personal computer starts feeling like a luxury item? If budget laptops already struggled with 8 gigabytes of RAM, imagine purchasing a brand new modern model only to discover you're still limited to 8 gigabytes, not because engineers lack the capability to do better, but because the quality memory was already committed long before you walked into the store. Locked into multi-year contracts feeding AI data centers. What you can do. But this isn't over yet. Consumers can push back through several strategies. Engage with policymakers. When your government announces new chip subsidies or AI innovation funding, that's your opportunity to contact representatives, voice concerns about how these subsidies funnel directly to megacorporations' profit margins at the expense of consumer technology. Demand contract transparency. Push for visibility into these massive contracts. When big tech signs multi-year agreements to stockpile memory, it rarely makes headlines, but you can pressure elected officials to investigate. Are these deals strangling supply for everyone else and artificially inflating prices? Support upgradable hardware. Vote with your voice and your purchasing decisions for upgradable devices. Support right-to-repair campaigns. When schools or governments announce laptop programs, demand user-replaceable RAM and standardized modules. If a manufacturer ships only soldered disposable machines, call out this practice and buy elsewhere when possible. Support businesses that respect your right to repair and upgrade. None of these actions fix the market overnight, but they absolutely shine light on the anti-consumer direction this industry is heading. With sufficient backlash, there's hope of eventually pressuring megacorporations to reverse course. Final thoughts. The next time you notice prices climbing in the tech sector, you'll understand the forces operating behind the scenes. This is a straightforward explanation of anti-consumer practices currently dominating big tech. Please don't sue us. Well, you're genuinely wonderful, and we'll see you in the next video.